What if the bravest soul in the deadliest jungle wasn't a soldier, but a 75-year-old grandmother from Montana? What if the greatest discovery of our time, something thought to be extinct for 65 million years, wasn't made by a scientist or an explorer, but by a retired schoolteacher with silver hair and a heart full of fire? This is not a movie. This is not fiction. This is the story of Annie Whitmore. And what she found was not just alive. It was hunting. And before we dive into the thickest jungles and face the beast that time forgot, make sure you subscribe to Bestscape channel, because here, every single day, we bring you stories of nature's secrets, untold adventures, and the most dangerous truths from the farthest corners of our planet. Hit that bell icon and become part of the journey, because you won't want to miss what happens next. They told her she was too old for danger, that her days of hiking mountains and studying wild creatures were long over. But Annie Whitmore never believed in endings. She believed in questions, especially the kind that nobody dared ask. After retiring from 40 years of teaching high school biology, she settled in Helena, Montana, in a small home filled with plants, fossils, and photographs from her younger, braver years. But her quiet life shattered the moment she received a strange envelope, weather-worn, damp, and reeking faintly of mud and time. Inside, just one blurry photograph, the close-up of a green-scaled creature's eye, enormous, yellow, with a black vertical slit. And tucked at the bottom of the frame, half buried in roots and leaves, her grandson Jake's backpack. Jake, the pride of her life, had gone missing 2 months ago while leading a scientific expedition in the depths of the Amazon rainforest. The officials claimed he'd drowned, that he was another name on a long list of lost explorers. But Annie knew better. That photo, real, recent, and raw, meant one thing. Jake had found something unbelievable. And it had found him back. 3 days later, she stood on a creaking wooden boat on the Rio Negro, soaked in sweat and humidity, the dense jungle closing in around her like a living wall. In her hand, she held Jake's last journal entry, scribbled coordinates circled in red. A young local guide named Diego sat beside her, gripping a rusted machete with nervous hands. "This area," he whispered, "it is cursed. We call it Terra da Fera, land of the beast. People who go there don't come back." Annie didn't flinch. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, stayed fixed on the misty tree line ahead. She wasn't here to turn back. She was here to find her grandson and face whatever monster had taken him. As the boat slowed and nudged the muddy riverbank, Annie stepped off into the jungle's breath, thick, hot, humming with unseen life. Every step deeper felt like stepping back through time. The air smelled of rot and rain. Vines twisted like snakes. Distant calls echoed from creatures she couldn't name. But what chilled her wasn't what she could hear. It was what she couldn't. That deep silence between sounds. That feeling, old and instinctive, that something was watching. Something massive. Something waiting. The kind of silence that belongs to a hunter. She paused by a tree scarred with deep claw marks, each one the length of a man's arm. Diego refused to go further. "Señora, whatever did this is not natural." She only nodded. Her boots sank into wet earth as she moved forward alone, deeper into the uncharted green. She wasn't just searching for Jake now. She was chasing a ghost from Earth's darkest past. And somewhere, beyond the curtain of vines and mist, it breathed. The forest swallowed her. One step, then another, and the light from the river was gone. Behind her, the world she knew disappeared into thick mist and the whisper of leaves. Annie's breath slowed. Her boots sank deeper with each step, mud sucking at her heels like claws pulling her back. But her grip tightened on the machete, and her eyes scanned every flicker in the shadows. She had hunted truth all her life. Now, it was hunting her. The deeper she went, the stranger things became. Trees stood impossibly tall, wrapped in vines as thick as cables. But it wasn't just their size, it was their silence. Birds didn't chirp here, insects didn't buzz. No monkeys howled from the canopy. It was like nature had gone still, or gone extinct. Then she noticed it, deep impressions in the wet earth. Not footprints, craters. Massive, three-toed, sunken so far into the soil that water pooled in them. She knelt, pressed her fingers to one. The ground was still warm. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't a myth. This wasn't a hallucination. Something massive had passed through here not long ago. She reached for Jake's journal, flipping through the pages until she found the sketch. Same 3 toes, same pattern. He had seen it too. Suddenly, the canopy above her rustled. Not softly, but violently. Leaves poured down. Branches snapped. Something huge had moved. Fast, and not far. She froze. The jungle went still again, but her ears caught a low, rhythmic sound. Thump, thump, thump. Not a heartbeat. Footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. A predator on patrol. She moved swiftly now, weaving through the trees, her breath shallow. Each step brought her closer to the GPS coordinates circled in red ink, the place where Jake's signal had vanished. And then she saw it. A clearing. Dead center in the jungle, surrounded by broken trees and crushed foliage like something had landed or fought a war here. Bones scattered the ground, rib cages the size of oil drums, skulls longer than a man was tall. But this wasn't a graveyard of ancient fossils. These were fresh, clean, stripped, and something had gnawed the bones. She stepped into the clearing, crouching near a shattered helmet. Jake's. Her throat tightened. But just as she reached to pick it up, a distant roar cut through the jungle, low, deep, impossible. The kind of sound that doesn't echo in your ears, but in your spine. She turned toward the trees. Something was moving toward her, fast. Trees shook. Birds exploded into the air. And from behind the vines and mist, a silhouette emerged. Towering, broad, the gleam of scaled skin in the sun. A head tilted slowly, eyes like molten gold locking onto her. Annie didn't run. She stood tall. She had come this far, and whatever this thing was, it would know her name. It stepped into the clearing like a god reborn from the soil. Towering over the trees, muscles rippling under forest-green scales, each step shook the earth. Its eyes glowed, not like fire, but like judgment. Deep, intelligent, ancient. This was no mindless brute. This was an apex predator, and it had spotted Annie. Her hands trembled, but she didn't back away. Not yet. The creature's snout stretched forward, nostrils flaring as it tasted the air. Her scent. Her presence. It let out a low, rumbling growl that seemed to fold the forest in on itself. Trees bent in the echo. Birds vanished. Even the insects went silent again. Annie slowly crouched behind a fallen log, her breathing shallow, heart hammering against her ribs. She reached into her satchel, pulled out a small metallic capsule, Jake's emergency flare. One pull, one chance. She knew this wasn't a fight she could win. But maybe, just maybe, she could survive it. The beast moved closer. It towered just meters away now. Its feet sank into the mud, claws digging grooves into the earth. Its head dipped slightly. A single huff of breath steamed in the air between them. And then, it lunged. With a roar that shattered the silence, it launched forward like a storm. Annie rolled to the side, mud splashing across her face, lungs burning. The flare. She ripped the cap and fired it. A streak of red fire shot into the canopy with a screaming hiss. For a second, the creature paused, its eyes tracking the flare's path as it burst into light above the trees. Confused? Distracted? Maybe. She didn't wait. She ran. Branches tore at her arms. Thorns ripped her sleeves. The jungle became a blur of green and panic. Behind her, the ground exploded with each step of the beast. She didn't look back. She could feel it, hear it, the way the air seemed to vanish in its wake. She spotted a narrow rock crevice ahead, a deep crack between 2 stone ridges. Too narrow for the beast, maybe wide enough for her. She dived. Rock scraped her arms. Her bag caught. She ripped it free and kept sliding until her back hit cool stone and the world went dark. The roar came again, just outside, louder, angrier. But the beast couldn't follow. It scraped at the edges of the rock, claws slamming against stone with the sound of 1,000 knives. Then, silence. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. Annie sat in the darkness, chest heaving, blood trickling down her arm. She had seen it. She had lived through it. A living dinosaur. No mistake. No myth. Real. And Jake. If he had seen the same thing, if he had survived, he was somewhere in this jungle, alone. Or worse, not alone. Annie gritted her teeth. She pulled out her flashlight, flicked it on, and began crawling deeper into the rocky crevice. This was no longer a rescue mission. This was war. The crevice twisted like the throat of the earth, narrow, winding, and damp. Annie crawled for what felt like hours, her flashlight flickering as the battery faded. The rock walls closed in around her, whispering with echoes of dripping water. But something in her gut kept her going. A pull, a presence. Like the jungle wasn't just hiding something, it was calling her toward it. Then, just when the darkness felt eternal, she saw light. Not daylight, firelight. She pushed forward, heart pounding, and emerged into a cavern the size of a football field. Glowing moss lit the walls in eerie green, and torches, real torches, burned at the edges. Someone had been here, recently. Footsteps echoed behind her. She spun around, clutching a rock as a weapon. "Don't move," a voice barked. A man stepped from the shadows, lean, bearded, eyes hollow with survival. But Annie's breath caught in her throat. "Jake." He froze. So did she. Then, after what felt like a decade, he spoke again. "Annie?" They rushed to each other, brother and sister, separated by madness, now united by the same. Jake looked thinner, older, broken in places she couldn't see. "You shouldn't have come," he whispered. Annie's eyes narrowed. "You're alive. I came to bring you home." Jake laughed bitterly. "There is no home anymore. Not for me. Not for this place. You don't know what's out there, Annie. The dinosaur you saw? That's one of many. This entire jungle. It's not on any map. It's not on any satellite. It's a lost world." He led her through the cavern, past crude tables carved from stone, tools made of bone and metal, and strange markings etched into the walls. "We call it the Domain," Jake continued. "A prehistoric pocket of Earth that time forgot. But it didn't forget us." Annie frowned. "Us?" He nodded toward a tunnel. From the shadows, more people emerged. A dozen survivors, some American, some not. A paleobotanist from Chicago, a geologist from Arizona, a field medic, a young girl barely 10. Each with stories of how they found this jungle. Crash landings, lost expeditions, failed satellites. No one ever meant to stay, but none ever left. "They say the jungle chooses who stays," Jake whispered. "Those who find it are part of it now." Annie looked around at the makeshift village, the ancient fossils turned into tools, the sounds of distant beastly growls echoing beyond the walls. She had come to find her brother. But now she had uncovered something much larger, a forgotten world, untouched by civilization, ruled by creatures from Earth's distant past, and humans who had learned to live among them. But just as her mind began to process it all, the ground trembled again. A sharp horn-like roar pierced the silence, and Jake's eyes widened with fear. "They've found us," he whispered. Annie turned toward the darkness. The hunt wasn't over. It had just begun. The jungle floor quaked with a rumble that shook the very bones of the cavern. Annie grabbed Jake's arm as dust fell from above. "That sound," she said, voice tight. "It's back." Jake didn't answer. He just turned toward the outer chamber where the others were huddled. "Everyone inside, now!" he shouted. The people moved fast, like they'd rehearsed this moment too many times. Annie looked around, confused. "What is it? Another dinosaur?" Jake nodded slowly. "Worse. We call it the Alpha. A male, aggressive, smart, big enough to take down a mammoth, fast enough to outpace a cheetah, and it's hunting again." Annie stared toward the tunnel. A deep, echoing roar cut through the air like a blade. It was close. Very close. Jake grabbed a spear, handed Annie a machete. "We fight if we must, but if it breaks the cavern, run for the trees. It won't follow past the river." They moved quietly to the entrance. Outside, the jungle was deathly still. No birds, no buzzing, no breath, just silence. And then the thunder of footsteps. Trees bent, branches cracked, and through the mist it emerged. A hulking beast, 20 feet tall, muscles rippling beneath scaly skin. Its eyes burned with primal rage. Its snout sniffed the air. It had found them. The Alpha. Before they could react, A shriek rang out from behind. Annie turned to see flames. Flames inside the cavern. Someone had set their supplies on fire. Panic spread like wildfire. Jake's face twisted. No! Someone betrayed us. A figure sprinted out from the shadows. Harold, one of the researchers Annie had met earlier. He was running toward the Alpha, holding a beacon, shouting, "Here! I'm the one you want! Come take me!" But his voice cracked with madness, not courage. Jake cursed. "He thinks he can control it. He's led it here." The Alpha charged, powerful, ruthless. In one leap, it was on Harold, jaws snapping shut with a sickening crunch. Blood sprayed across the roots. Annie froze, heart hammering. Jake pulled her back. "Forget him. We need to move." But the beast turned its gaze to the cave. Its nostrils flared. It had tasted blood, and it wanted more. Annie and Jake led the survivors out the back exit, a hidden tunnel through the rocks. Behind them, the Alpha roared again, louder, closer. It wouldn't stop until they were all dead. The forgotten world was no longer quiet. It was awake, and it was hungry. They ran through the narrow tunnel, the walls closing in with every heartbeat. Behind them, the Alpha's roars echoed like thunder, shaking the stone beneath their feet. Annie held onto Jake's shoulder as they led the survivors through the dark passage, gasping for breath. When they finally emerged into the dense jungle clearing on the other side, the air was thick with humidity and dread. Jake pointed toward a twisted patch of vegetation, massive thorn-covered vines woven together like a living wall. "This is where we make our stand," he said. Annie raised an eyebrow, still catching her breath. "Against that thing?" Jake nodded grimly. "These aren't ordinary vines. They're from the serratus plant, prehistoric, razor-sharp. Even a beast like the Alpha can bleed here." The survivors worked fast. Jake gave orders. Annie gathered the flammable sap Jake had shown her earlier, sticky, glowing resin oozing from tree trunks that could ignite with a spark. They coated the thorns, they dug a pit, they lined it with stakes carved from ancient bones. The trap would need to be perfect. The Alpha wasn't just any predator, it was the apex. "You think this will stop it?" Annie whispered as the sky darkened. Jake looked up. "It has to." Night fell. And with it came silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that held its breath before a storm. Then came the footsteps. Distant. Measured. Heavy. The Alpha had tracked their scent. Annie crouched behind a massive fern, clutching a flare. Jake held the torch. Around them, the jungle warriors, scientists turned survivors, waited with weapons in hand. The trees parted. The Alpha stepped into the clearing, its breath steaming, its eyes glowing yellow in the firelight. For a moment it stood still, sniffing, thinking. Then it charged, straight into the trap. The ground gave way with a thunderous crack. The Alpha roared as it fell, crashing into the pit lined with bones and sap-soaked thorns. Jake lit the torch and hurled it. Flames erupted. The beast thrashed wildly, its screeches ripping through the night. But something was wrong. It was climbing out. Even bleeding, even burning, it was too strong. Annie didn't think. She ran, straight toward it, and with the last flare in hand, she leapt, jamming it into the beast's eye. A blinding flash, a final scream, then silence. Smoke curled into the sky. The Alpha lay still. Annie collapsed. Jake caught her. The survivors gathered around the pit. No cheers, just awe, relief, fear. "It's over," Jake whispered. But Annie looked toward the jungle, toward the deeper parts they hadn't explored. "No," she said quietly. "This was just the beginning." Smoke still lingered over the jungle canopy. The Alpha was dead, but the jungle didn't feel safer. In fact, it felt darker, like something had changed. Annie sat near the embers, her hand bandaged, her body bruised, but her eyes alert. Jake approached, holding a broken device they had found near Harold's body. "This isn't from our research team," he said, his brow furrowed. "It's military grade, satellite-linked, encrypted." Annie took it, recognizing the serial markings. "This is American." Jake looked up, confused. "You mean, there's someone else here?" Annie stood slowly. "Someone sent Harold here. He wasn't a lost scientist. He was planted, and someone was watching us." Just then, a sharp whistle echoed through the jungle. It wasn't natural. It was human. They froze. From the shadows, two figures emerged. Not from the tribe, not survivors, dressed in dark tactical gear, faces masked, armed. Annie raised her hand. "Who are you?" One of them removed his mask. A weathered face, maybe in his 50s, eyes cold and calculating. "Name's Rooker. I'm with Black Delta. You just took out our experiment." Jake stepped forward. "You're what?" Rooker didn't blink. "The Alpha was bred, not born. We made it. And you just burned millions of dollars of research." Annie's stomach sank. "You created that monster?" "We enhanced it," Rooker corrected. "Spliced genes, ancient DNA. You think this jungle is lost? It's a lab. And now, because of you, we have a breach." Before anyone could respond, a scream rang out from deeper in the jungle. One of their guards had vanished. No blood. No tracks. Just gone. Rooker looked into the trees, suddenly uneasy. "Damn it," he hissed. "It's awake." Annie stepped closer. "What's awake?" Rooker turned to her. "We weren't just working on dinosaurs. We were studying something smarter, something older. We called it the Watcher." Jake's eyes narrowed. "Where is it?" Rooker's voice was almost a whisper. "It doesn't live somewhere. It lives everywhere. It hides. It listens. It learns." Suddenly, a deep growl echoed from above. Everyone looked up. Hidden between the branches, two glowing green eyes, unblinking, watching. And then, they vanished. Annie's voice was low and steady. "We've entered its territory now." Rooker nodded slowly. "And it doesn't like trespassers." The night grew thicker. Even the insects had gone silent, as if they too feared what was lurking in the shadows. The camp was quiet, but tension cracked in the air like static before a storm. Grandma Annie cleaned her rifle with hands that were steady, but eyes that flickered with concern. Jake paced near the perimeter, torch in hand, eyes scanning every leaf. Then came the sound. A low, dragging shuffle, like something walking, but not quite human. They all froze. The survivors, Rooker's men, even Annie. The jungle ahead of them seemed to twist as if alive. Trees swayed without wind. The firelight dimmed unnaturally. A scream broke the silence, sharp, guttural, then suddenly cut off. One of Rooker's men vanished into the darkness, his rifle clattering to the ground, still warm. Jake rushed toward the sound but stopped dead. There, on the ground, were claw marks, but not like the Alpha's. These were long, deliberate, as if something had written a message in the dirt. Annie bent down to read it, and her breath caught. "I see you." She stood up slowly. "It's not a beast," she whispered. "It's a mind." Rooker barked orders. "Full alert, defensive circle, thermal scans, now." But the monitors flickered. Every digital screen in the camp glitched, scrambled, then went black. The jungle was no longer just dark. It was invisible. Suddenly, something crashed through the trees. But it wasn't the Watcher. It was a dead dinosaur. Its neck snapped, eyes wide in terror. It had been hunted. Jake stepped back. "That thing, it kills them too?" Annie clenched her jaw. "It's not just surviving, it's cleaning the jungle. Anything loud, messy, unpredictable, it removes it." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Including us." Then, like shadows peeling off the trees, it appeared. The Watcher was tall, 7 feet at least, its body sinewy and camouflaged like a chameleon. Its skin shimmered, shifting with the light. But the eyes, those eyes were ancient, cold, intelligent. It didn't charge, it stalked. Rooker fired. Bullets sparked off trees as the Watcher vanished again. From the left, another scream, then the right. The creature was everywhere. Every gun fired, but hit nothing. Fear turned into chaos. Annie grabbed Jake. "We can't fight it like this, it's smarter than us." Jake looked around, panic creeping in. "Then how do we stop it?" Annie stared into the jungle, eyes narrowing. "We don't trap it. We let it trap us, and then flip the game." She turned to Rooker. "Tell me you have explosives." Rooker's eyes widened. "You're insane." Annie smiled grimly. "No, I'm a grandma, and when something threatens my family, I burn the whole jungle down if I have to." The jungle was no longer a battlefield. It was a mind game, and the Watcher was winning. But Annie wasn't the type to fold. She stood at the edge of the camp, a flare in one hand, her knife strapped tight, and a small C4 charge hidden beneath her jacket. Jake pleaded, "You can't go in alone. That thing will rip you apart." Annie touched his shoulder, firm but calm. "That's what it wants, Jake. Prey that panics. But I'm not prey. I'm the bait." She lit the flare, its red light casting demonic shadows on the leaves. "Let's see if it likes fire." Slowly, she walked into the dark. Behind her, Jake and Rooker stayed low, tracking her movement on a backup thermal scanner, until it flickered and died. Annie moved through the trees like a ghost, silent and steady. The jungle seemed to shift around her as if watching. Every step deeper brought a chill, not from cold, but from something old, buried, aware. And then, she heard it. A soft clicking. Not mechanical, biological. Language. The Watcher was speaking. Annie stopped, letting her breathing slow. She dropped the flare. Its red glow illuminated a clearing, and there, in the center, bones. Piles of them, arranged in patterns, circles, spirals, symbols. She had found its nest. Suddenly behind her, the trees rustled. She turned. The Watcher stood less than 10 feet away, completely still, its head tilted, curious, as if studying her. Annie slowly raised her hands. "I know you're not just an animal," she said, voice steady. "You're more than that. You see, you think, you choose." The Watcher stepped closer, silently. Its eyes glowed softly in the dark. "You've been testing us, haven't you?" she whispered. "Not for territory, but for threats." It didn't move, just watched. "I came here to find monsters," she said. "Turns out the monsters were human, and maybe you were the guardian all along." For a moment, just one, it blinked, almost as if it understood. Annie's hand slid toward her detonator. Her voice was cold now. "But even guardians need to learn. You don't stalk a soldier's family." She slammed the button, but nothing happened. The Watcher raised one long finger. In its other hand, the C4 trigger. It had taken it from her pack minutes ago. Annie froze. Her heart raced. For the first time, she realized it hadn't been hunting her, it had been leading her. The trees shifted again. More eyes appeared. Smaller, younger. She wasn't in a nest. She was in a nursery. And she had just declared war. Annie didn't scream. She didn't run. She stood still, surrounded by shadows that breathed. The Watcher towered above her, holding the detonator, its glowing eyes locked with hers. But it didn't attack. It didn't roar. It simply stepped back and vanished into the dark. She was alone, but not forgotten. Back at the broken camp, Jake and Rooker were preparing for a retreat. The last drone footage showed Annie heading toward the mountain ridge, but then the feed cut to static. "She's gone," Rooker muttered. "We need to pull out." "No," Jake snapped. "She's still out there, and I'm not leaving her." Suddenly, the radio crackled. A whisper. "Jake? Copy? Grandma? I found the nest. There's more. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. They're not just surviving, they're evolving." Static. Then silence. Rooker turned pale. "If those things reach civilization—" "They won't," Jake said. "We're gonna stop it. Here." Night fell like a trap. The team packed what little explosives they had left. Rooker mapped the cave systems, now knowing the Watcher's nest ran deep underground. Their plan was risky. Seal the tunnels and bait the Watcher into the upper valley, then detonate the ridge and bury it all. "Do you know what this means?" Rooker whispered. "We're not just killing it. We're destroying the oldest secret on Earth." "No." Annie's voice came through the radio again, weak but steady. "We're giving it peace." As the final plan unfolded, Annie moved through the tunnels with a stolen egg cradled in her arms. It pulsed faintly, warm. The others didn't chase her. They watched. She reached the top of the valley where the explosives were set. Behind her, the Watcher emerged, slow, almost reluctant. It saw the egg in her hands. "I know what this means to you," she said, her voice breaking. "But they'll never let your kind live. You know that." The creature blinked, then stepped back. For a moment, time stood still. Then Rooker hit the switch. The mountain shook. Explosions tore through the tunnels. Fire lit the sky, and the valley collapsed into itself. Jake screamed Annie's name, but saw her silhouette running just in time through the falling ash. She made it, barely. The Watcher was gone, its nest buried beneath a mountain of stone and silence. But as dawn broke, Annie reached into her jacket and pulled out the egg. Alive, protected. She whispered, "We may have ended the war, but maybe, just maybe, we saved the future." Legacy of the Jungle in the same cinematic English style as before, with tightly written continuous lines and no extra line breaks. Grandma Annie sat at the edge of the collapsed valley, her breath shaky, her arms cradling the warm, living egg. Dust still floated through the air like ancient spirits retreating to silence. The mountain had sealed its secrets once again, but this time she had taken a piece of that secret with her. Jake stumbled toward her from the tree line, scratched, bruised, but alive. "I thought I lost you," he whispered, collapsing to his knees beside her. "I thought you were gone." Annie didn't speak at first. Her eyes were locked on the egg, which pulsed faintly in her hands. "We didn't destroy it," she said quietly. "We made a choice. Maybe the right one." Jake looked at the egg and then at her, a flicker of awe on his face. "What are you going to do with it?" Annie slowly stood up, dusting off her coat. "I'm going to protect it, raise it, teach it not to be a monster." Jake chuckled softly. "Like a pet?" "No," she said firmly. "Like a future." In the following days, the military sealed the valley. Official reports claimed it was a seismic collapse. No mention of creatures, no mention of eggs. Rooker was never found. His greed buried with the bones of the past. But in a quiet corner of Oregon, in a greenhouse surrounded by trees, Annie built something new. A habitat, a home. The egg hatched one misty morning. Small, feathered, intelligent. Its eyes were dark and curious, not wild. It didn't roar. It purred. She named it Echo, because it wasn't just a memory of what once ruled the earth. It was a whisper of what could come next. And every morning, as Annie stood with her hand on the glass watching Echo grow, she whispered the same words. "Not all monsters are born. Some are made. And some can be unmade." 3 years later, a storm rolled over the Pacific Northwest. Rain lashed the tall pines, thunder echoed across the mountains. Inside her secluded cabin, Annie sat at a wooden table, reading old journal entries, notes about behavior, growth patterns, diet. Echo, now the size of a lion, slept curled near the fireplace, its eyes twitching in dreams. Then, glass shattered. A drone, military grade, crashed through the greenhouse. Annie ran outside. Floodlights snapped on. Dozens of boots hit the ground. Men in black uniforms surrounded the property. One of them stepped forward. "Ma'am, step away from the animal." Annie raised her hand slowly. "He's not a threat." "That's not your decision anymore," the man replied coldly. "We've been tracking biosignals. Something down there in the valley didn't die. Something woke up." At that moment, a rumble spread through the earth, distant, deep. The trees shook, not from wind, but from something ancient moving beneath. Annie looked toward the mountains. "You buried the nest, but you never understood it." Behind her, Echo stood tall, staring at the forest with a low growl. "They were never monsters," Annie whispered. "They were survivors. We're the invaders." Sirens blared. A second drone feed flickered on a soldier's screen. Thermal images. Dozens of heat signatures moving in formation. Claws, tails, eyes that glowed in the dark. The soldier looked up, pale. "They're coming." And then, across the valley, a roar thundered louder than the storm itself. Not one, not alone, but many. The earth, it seemed, was reclaiming what once belonged to it.